while since my last Pokemon countdown. Reason why is because way too many people had been doing top 100 Pokemon countdown lists at once, to the point of me suffering from Pokemon countdown burnout. It took me years to recover from it, but now I think I'm finally ready to do a list. There aren't many Christmas topics that I can think of anyways that I haven't done yet, so this is what I have to do. Now here are the rules. No more than 2 Pokemon per generation, and they can't qualify just because they have an alternate form. Only their original form counts. So it's time to get this countdown out. Crabominable seems like a cool Pokemon. Even though it's already our 4th crab Pokemon, it overall seems pretty nice, being a fighting type crab. Kinda weird that it isn't a water type since, you know, it's a crab and all, but looks can be deceiving. But after several hours of trying to evolve this thing, it'll make me question, how do I evolve it? Well, it turns out, you evolve it by taking it to Mount Lanakila and leveling it up there. Then, you get to see its evolution. Now this Pokemon has taken the form of what is not just a crab, but it may have been based off a Yeti crab. If so, that's pretty unique among other crustacean-related Pokemon. Not only that, if you look at its typing, it's an ice fighting type. I was wondering how they'd be able to make an ice fighting Pokemon, but now it looks like we finally got one. I'm not very big on its design, but considering how it's supposedly a cross between a Yeti and a Yeti crab, that's a clever idea if that's what they were going for. And do I even need to mention its devastating attack stat? This makes this Pokemon a very hard hitter, especially if you have the Iron Fist ability and teach it Ice Hammer. But what keeps it from being higher is that for a Pokemon that can only be obtained by leveling it up at what is basically the Victory Road in this game, you'd think it would have better overall stats. Its stats are pretty good, but I was expecting it to be like in the 500s instead of being 478. But nonetheless, I do not regret using it on my team. Before I got Diamond and Pearl, I knew that I wanted to have an Abomasnow on my team, because I loved Snover's design as a Christmas tree Pokemon, and even though it kinda loses that and becomes an abominable snowman, I still wanted one on my team. Speaking of which, I'm surprised it even took this long for a Yeti Pokemon. This guy has a very unique typing, being ice and grass. Considering how cold air harms plants, I was wondering how they'd let these two types live in harmony, but they found a way. Even 3 generations later, its typing is still unique! Plus, its stats are very well balanced. Well, except for its speed, which is actually pretty cruddy, but did you really expect a Pokemon that looks like this to be fast? As for its Mega Evolution, this thing looks impossibly more awesome than normal Abomasnow, and even though its speed is even worse, it has the greatest special attack out of all non-legendary ice Pokemon. On top of that, it has a very high attack stat compared to other grass types, and it's no pushover. But be careful with its Snow Warning ability, or some of your other Pokemon might be damaged. But on the plus side, you can get a lot more hits with Blizzard, so that's something. For a generation that brought in some amazing Pokemon, there aren't many ice Pokemon that I can call amazing. Cryogonal and Beartic are only decent, and Vanillix, while I like it a little bit, it has a dumb design. Look, I love ice cream as much as the next guy, but why would you design a Pokemon based off it? But there is one that I do think is awesome, and why do I even bother building it up? Considering the process of elimination, you'd probably know that I'm talking about Kyurem. I'm pretty sure it goes without saying that Kyurem has the highest stats out of any ice Pokemon in the series. Well, counting out Frostplace Arceus, of course. Now to be honest, even though Kyurem is a good Pokemon, I found its normal form to be only decent. Compared to other Super Legendaries, its stats are still great, but not as good as most Uber Legendaries. Its back animated sprite looks like it's constipated. But then when Black and White 2 came out, Kyurem only got cooler when it gained the ability to morph together with Zekrom or Reshiram to change its form. What's its base stat total now? 700. That's almost as strong as Arceus. I personally prefer the black design better, because it looks cooler, and because I've always liked Zekrom better than Reshiram anyways, because of its design and how I prefer lightning over fire. Along with these two new forms, it learns some new moves. Freeze Shock for Black Kyurem, and Iceburn for white Kyurem. And by the names, you can probably tell what they do. Simply put, Kyurem is a good Pokemon. But why is it only number 8? I can't really explain why. I just prefer the top 7 for some reason. Hey guys, what would you think of us getting an Iceberg Pokemon? It's much more awesome than it sounds. Meet Avalugg, the evolved form of Bergmite. It may have bad special stats and speed, but Avalugg makes up for that instantly. With high HP and a tremendous amount of defense that you'd expect from a steel type, you'll be able to annoy the heck out of physical attackers with it. Though I'm not really sure if I can say the same about how it fares against special attackers. Even though it doesn't learn a wide variety of types of moves by level up, it can still learn moves like Earthquake, Terra Ball, and Stone Edge by usage of TM, in addition to the moves it can learn on its own, so that makes its move pool decent. And I don't know why, but something about that flat surface looks pretty awesome to me. I mean, I'm not obsessing over it, but for some reason, I just like it, and overall, I love this Pokemon in general. I can't believe Generation 3 gave us another Water Ice Pokemon. We've already had 3 of those before the 3rd generation. This just makes me so mad. Or at least it would have been if Walrein wasn't so hard to hate. As the final evolution of the ever so adorable Spheal, Walrein, despite its overdone typing, still has a pretty unique design. It's a walrus. Those are cool animals, are they not? Well, unless you have a difference of opinion. Like Abomasnow, its stats are very well rounded with the exception of its speed. Plus, if your Walrein has thick fat, it can actually have a 1/8 resistance to ice. That's something that you don't see a lot in Pokemon. Just amazing. It just bothers me that it's one of the only 3 ice Pokemon in the Hoendex. And how, like the other 2, you can't even get its first evolution until late in the game. Even if Hoenn is a tropical setting, that's kind of disappointing. But in the end, all that will pay off when you have a very formidable Pokemon by your side. Mamoswine was already a really neat Pokemon on its own. Its stats may have only been 450, but back then it was understandable, since there weren't as many Pokemon that were that strong. Even when 450 became an outdated base stat total, what did they do? They turned Mamoswine into a mammoth. A mammoth! Just look at this beast and tell me that it's a pushover. As a Pokemon that seems like it must have been around for 10,000 years, its attack stat is about as good as you'd expect. One hit from it will send your enemies crying home to their mommies. Plus, with the amount of type coverage Ground and Ice have, they can both super effectively hit and same type attack bonus 9 different types. That's so much that even if it doesn't have thick fat, its weakness to all 3 of the main starters doesn't matter. I just wish Game Freak would add more new evolutions to older Pokemon, instead of listening to all these unbelievable whiners who complain about it for some reason they won't explain. Because this is what you can do when you make a real evolution to an old Pokemon. One of the reasons Generation 1 hasn't aged well at all is because a lot of its Pokemon have pretty dumb concepts by today's standards. Yes, we have some pretty sweet designs like a fire horse and an enormous sea serpent, but look at some of the others. An ordinary bird, a Pokeball with a face, a whatever the heck this thing is, and even a regular seal that's even named Seal, just with a different spelling. But what happens when you get creative for once? You get Lapras. One of the strongest ice Pokemon in existence, and based off the Loch Ness Monster, which is already a great idea to base a Pokemon off, and very high stats for a Gen 1 ice Pokemon, it's hard to deny how lovable this creature is. Also, it has a unique surf sprite in X and Y. Very nice touch. I'm glad that Ash used one in his Orange Island adventures. It's just saddening how it's said to be an endangered Pokemon. Just the thought that an amazing Pokemon like this could be on the verge of extinction. Well, it's been endangered since Generation 1 and it's still alive, so I think it'll be alright. You know what's baffling? The fact that despite fossilized Pokemon existing from day 1, it's taken a while for them to make one that looks like an actual dinosaur. Can you name one prior to Generation 6? Oh, then can you name one that's land-based? Like I was saying, Generation 6 did have 2 of these, being Tyrantrum, and the number 3 entry on here, which is also what I believe is the most underrated Pokemon from Kalos, Aurorus. Look at it. Doesn't it look elegant? Not only that, but it's also the tallest fossil Pokemon. And if you think its appearance is the only reason why I adore it, it has the highest HP of all rock types, and its move pool gives it access to a lot of different types of moves. Plus, its Refrigerate ability is very unique. As long as you don't count Mega Evolutions, Refrigerate, which turns all of its normal moves into ice moves, really works in its favor because the ice is much better offensively than normal, since it actually is strong against something, and nothing is immune to it. Even though it now doesn't do much to ice and fire, remember that it's also part rock, which can take them out with ease. So why do people hate it in spite of all its positives? Oh right, because it has 2 quadruple weaknesses. And yet they never complain about Golem. If its quadruple weaknesses bother you that much, there's a simple solution. Don't use it against steel and fighting types. Bottom line, Aurorus is much more awesome than people make it out to be. Not saying you have to like it, but please understand. Say hello to the ice member of the Regice trio, Regice, a Pokemon that you should never underestimate. As one of the first 2 pure ice types ever introduced, along with the Snorunt line, it's no surprise that Regice is one powerful Pokemon. Its special defense is unimaginable, so it can take special moves for a long period of time. Even its physical defense is fine, and the design is a very nice reference to the Hebrew myth of the golems, making finding Regice, as well as the other 2 Regis, feel like you're actually discovering creatures that can only be seen in ancient times. It learns a very decent variety of moves too. Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Focus Blast. You can hit most anything with either a normally effective or a super effective hit. Give me one good reason as to how you can go wrong with that. Look out everyone, here comes a truly amazing ice Pokemon. But what could be better? I tried. I really did. I didn't want to have a Generation 1 Pokemon at the number 1 spot, but I just couldn't resist. Articuno is my favorite Ice-type Pokemon. Look at it. It's one of the most beautiful Pokemon in the world. Well, except for in yellow, where its sprite looks dumb. As for how it performs, every single stat it has is good. Even its speed, which isn't as good as you'd expect, you can fix that because Articuno can learn Agility. Its typing may not be as unique anymore, but at least it's not as common as Zapdos and Moltres' types. Also, watch out, because Articuno can learn both Mind Reader and Sheer Cold. When you combine both of these moves, you'll know that you'd better knock it out quick, otherwise it'll blow through your entire team within minutes if you don't have rock types or Pokemon with Sturdy. And wouldn't you know, it's the only Pokemon other than Smeargle who can do this. To add to that, it's one of the few Pokemon that can learn Freeze Dry, which, unlike most Ice-type moves, is super effective against water Pokemon. I've always thought that Ice should be super effective against water since Ice freezes water, but with this move, it makes sense. Now just imagine how incredible a Mega Articuno would be. Articuno is a very powerful Pokemon, it has a great design, it learns some very useful moves, and it is my favorite Ice-type Pokemon.